Hello, strangelings. Welcome back to my parlor. So today I wanted to talk about, well, I honestly don't know how many people this would be a woe to, honestly. I am sure that I am not the only one that's had this issue, however. You see, I am someone who, unfortunately, my abuse started when I was 2 weeks old. And being that I started to be in a massive amount of pain starting at 2 weeks of life, I was unable to form a true sense of self until I was much, much older. And in fact, there are still parts of my personality that I'm still trying to initialize just the right way. This is something that the reason why I bring it up is because it has burned me so very hard in the past. You see, not being able to form a sense of self the same way normal people do, I have no choice but to absorb far more of the real world around me than most other people tend to. My husband, who his childhood abuse started around the same time in his life as mine had, doesn't even have this issue. So it's not even everyone who's gone through childhood trauma as early as mine, or even as severe as mine, because I would definitely say his levels of trauma are pretty damn close to mine. You see, as a child, I absorbed everything, but part of absorbing everything is absorbing an honest accounting of one's own talents and abilities. When I tell people I can't draw worth a shit, I'm telling them the truth. Half of my brain will draw, okay, looks kind of decent, I guess. The other half can't do much more than scribble. Funny enough, it's the left side that tends to be decent and the right side that tends to look scribbled. Being that I was trained to be right-handed, even though I am purely ambidextrous, which means both sides actually fight for dominance. Kind of funny. So, because of this, because of my observations not only of the world around me, but of my abilities too, I have had a very reasonable and honest accounting when people ask me of the things I can do. For instance, of course, I just recently had a conversation with one of my friends about how I can't actually do the whole pushing past the pain when it comes to exercise because my body has a very, very bad reaction to cortisol. And when that cortisol starts to build up in my body, when the lactic acid builds up too, and everything else, I start to feel pain. And I don't feel pain as in, oh my God, this hurts. I feel pain as in, oh my God, if I move, I will shatter. I know because I've pushed myself past it so many times that I understand that there's no way to get that reaction to ever ease. I mean, dear Lord, I spent into my 20s trying to be normal, with going out into the sun, with the chemical issues I have as far as breathing it in and my body's reaction to it, as far as exercise. I tried to be as normal as possible about everything. I literally would cry. I would have moments of pure, sheer breakdown because my lack of ability to get my body to just function normally, whether it's forcing it to function normally or slowly guiding myself into the more normal functionality. But this has made much, much, much worse issues in my life. For instance, there was the time in high school where a boy asked me out. He asked me to go play tennis with him, and I gave him a real assessment of my abilities in tennis. And he told me, oh, I'm not that good either. I'm sure you'll be fine. And when he found out I wasn't lying about my assessment, I never heard from him again. I have told people my abilities to lift, which they did not believe, and which had me literally feeling broken on the floor. I had 2 very severe examples in high school alone. One came in the form of my clays teacher. A wonderful man, by all accounts, with the exception of refusing to believe that I knew my body well enough to know my limits. You see, my wrists have been one of the particularly bad things about my body my entire life. My wrists are specifically very weak. My spine, my hips, my knees, and my ankles. Those are always the weakest points of my body. Of course, when I was 16, I got tendonitis, or was diagnosed with tendonitis in this shoulder because I kept carrying a 50-pound bag on my shoulder. Got drummed down to a 25-pound weight limit. Something I could not actually honor, because if I honored it, I would not be able to actually carry my school bag around. But I did, however, learn how to carry it on both shoulders instead, so at least I eased the weight load. Now, in my clay class, I had been experiencing issues with my wrists. This was an issue that many teachers had heard about when I had to do writing, especially because writing is very tiresome for the wrists. I had let him know that my wrists were hurting. They were so sore. I did not believe I would be able to actually participate in the clay portion of the class if I could just get a week to just do, maybe I could have a discussion with him about the principles of this in clay or that or whatever, but my wrists were an issue. My wrists probably felt about where they feel right now, which is, just so you guys know, severe tension to the point of near pain, which makes me feel like I have to pop it constantly, which is why you'll see me going like this in videos these days lately, because of course my wrists are giving me issues again. I said I might put videos up during this break, but guys, I am making these videos during the break, okay? So, of course, my wrists are still working on healing, and that's why in a couple of these videos, you guys have seen me with my wrist braces on. I came to school after my mother was told that the clay teacher did not believe that my wrists hurt that much. I came to school under her suggestion in my braces. Actually, we didn't have enough money to get braces for me specifically at the time, so they were technically her braces from her carpal tunnel. Mine is not carpal tunnel, guys. Mine is just a weakness or something, possibly a genetic disorder that there's no point in me getting a diagnosis for, because it's not like I can take the medication for it in the first place. But anyhow, she told me, put these braces on, go to school in the braces. Hopefully he'll understand, and he will let you have that time off for your wrists to take some time to heal. Unfortunately, it did not. Now, of course, I was a willful teenager. I decided to make the arrogantly bad decision to go ahead and skip class on day 2 of wearing my braces, or my mother's braces. Because on day 1, I was told I was faking it by same said teacher. Now, this teacher had some clout to say something like this because of the previous incident that had happened with a teacher and my pain issues. But this, of course, unfortunately, and I won't blame the teacher. Again, I was a willful teenager. But I will say that that teacher did actually earn some of the blame, even if I'm not placing it right now. I skipped, and I skipped, and finally I said, this teacher doesn't care about me, my health or well-being, so I just did not go back. Now, do I feel like it's a failing of the teacher? Do I feel like that teacher failed me in that class? Yes, actually I do. Because I had an actual condition. There was mentions in my school record. Had the teacher been smart enough to actually look at my school record, he would have known that this was far from the first time that I had joint pain issues that actually affected my ability to do these types of things. He chose not to. So I do feel like some of the blame does rest with my teacher. However, I was a willful teenager. I will accept at least 50% of that blame. But I will not accept more. Because I knew my pain boundaries by that time, especially with my wrists. And I told that teacher that I was in pain and I was going to need a week of rest in this particular class exercise to get myself out of that pain enough to continue the class. And he said no. It's the same principle as when I had my first job at APAC, telemarketing center, and my manager there chose to not let me have a day off to go to the doctor, seeing as how the only other days off I'd be able to take to be able to see the doctor would be during school. He wouldn't let me take the day off, any day off, to be able to go see the doctor to find out what was wrong with my throat. At a telemarketing firm, guys. My telemarketing boss didn't let me go see what was wrong with my throat. The incident that happened before this clay class, however, was actually in PE. You heard me say before, my hips have always been an issue as well. One of my issues with my hips is actually dysplasia, where my hips will partially pop out of place and sit partially in and partially outside of the joint. It makes it painful to walk, yes, but it is not impossible to walk in. However, during an exercise such as the grapevine, where I'm going like this with my legs, hip dysplasia, because I'm literally taking that hip joint, the ball of that hip joint, and going like this with my leg. Literally, because that's what happens when you have dysplasia and you are crossing your legs over one another. That hip joint will slightly pop out. It became a painful experience by about the third or fourth time my teacher had me doing the grapevine across the floor like everyone else. I almost fell over. I caught myself, and I don't think my teacher saw. But I walked over to the bleachers, and I tried to get my hips back into place, because I knew this particular teacher was not going to listen. So, I had that exact experience. Because instead of letting me do what I'm doing, and then get back to doing what she wants me to do, she walked over to me in the bleachers, or at the bleachers, because there was only 2-3 rows out. Just enough It was 2 rows, just enough to sit down, to relax, to listen to the teachers. She came over and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to get my hips back into place." She said, "What?" I said, "My hip has popped slightly out of place and it hurts like hell to do the grapevine, so I'm trying to get it back into place so I can continue doing this for you." Then she looked at me and said, "Excuse me? Your hips are not out of place. You would not have been able to walk over to these bleachers if your hips were out of place." When I tell you guys that I had no choice but to take 5 seconds to lower my rage at this. This was not the first time she told me I was not in the pain I was in. And this time was especially egregious, because this is something that is extremely, extremely painful, especially if I don't get my hip back in right, because then I squish and pinch on a nerve. There are nerves in each one that if I don't get my hip back just right, I'm pinching a nerve. Mainly because I either have more active or just more nerves in general than the average human being. There's a reason they call it an average. So she denies my pain, denies my pain, denies my pain. And finally I said, "Fine. If you don't believe me, call my mother." "Fine, go to the office." "Wait, don't go to my office." And she did just that. To wit, my mother said, "My child has literally been having issues with her hips pulling partially or fully out of place her entire life. You can talk to her doctor about the fact that she has had to learn, no choice but to walk forward with her hip partially out of place, because if she doesn't, and she doesn't get to a spot where she can actually stand to put her hip back in, she can't get her hip back in." I never had to do the grapevine ever again, but also this is the same woman who then contrived to become my actual counselor and then refused to let me have any mental health breaks at all in any of my classes. So, and believe me, she was the first one. I started to have counselors, obviously, in middle school. Well, I'm not sure how it worked in any other classroom, to be honest with you, or in any other school, to be honest with you, but in grade school, the nurse doubled as the counselor. So, having my mental health record, my schools have always known that I am going to need to have a mental health break here and there. You can't take a child who's been damaged since the second week of life and not have to have some kind of mental health regulation throughout almost any normal day. This is also the same teacher who, when I needed a half credit to graduate, not even before the end of the school year, deciding that I had no credits coming out of this semester, told my mother that I would have to plan for the next year, and then I proved her wrong. She's my inspiration to prove abusive folk wrong, to be honest with you. However, the reason I made this video talking about all these incidences in my life is because this is a pattern, you see. As I said, I am one of a fair few people who know my body so well, I can tell you exactly how to do whatever needs to be done with my body. I am my doctor's go-to, or when I had a regular doctor, I was always my doctor's regular go-to about what I'm feeling and where I'm feeling it. because of the fact that I can actually pinpoint what is feeling what. I can tell the doctor where the pain is, and he can tell me exactly which organ that is. And I can tell you, I can tell him, and he could tell me, as far as whether that seemed accurate for the kind of pain I was having, whether that seemed accurate for this, that, or the other illness, so on and so forth. I am far from the only one. I assume if I can tell you what's going wrong in my body at any given time, or be able to pinpoint it, or tell you the exact type of pain, pressure, sharp, literally give full descriptions of the pain, I can obviously tell you many. It's likely that somewhere near, maybe even half the population can probably do this. And moreover, I can tell you the fact that most individual human beings, if they took the time to listen to their body more, couldn't do it too. And the reason for that is because you are your body. We like to discuss so much whether we are the body or the brain. But the truth is, we are both. The brain is the powerhouse that makes everything move. We are like a flesh and bone suit of armor for our brain. However, they are attached to each other, married so deeply you cannot divorce them without killing one and then the other. So, we all actually have the capacity to learn our bodies so well that we know exactly what pain point we can hit in exercise, that we know exactly whether we need a week or a month to heal this particular wound, that we can tell exactly the type of pain we are having and the exact 3D location within our body as to where it is. We actually come with that capability. Unfortunately, of course, life gets in the way. Just like life gets in the way of understanding many, many, many things of nature. I make this video, of course. Perhaps you are somebody who has misunderstood that someone else actually understands their body well enough. Or perhaps you are an educator or a healer who maybe needs reminding that perhaps the people around you might know their bodies well enough that you should be consulting them far more on who they are and how to heal their personal issues. Or perhaps you are somebody who, like me, for the longest time, had no real confidence in your ability to figure out what was going on with yourself and get the appropriate and proper help you needed, because so many people choose in your life to tell you that you misunderstand your own limits. Hopefully, this video gave you some illumination on the subject to be able to grow your knowledge base on it. And to be honest, there's no real point beyond that. Alright guys, I am going to get out of here. I've got so much more work to do. Remember everyone, doesn't matter who you are, I love you. And take care of each other. And I'll see you guys in the next video.